They called our planet a Class 9 death world. They said the gravity alone would crush most species. They said the temperature swings, the storms, the biological diversity, the sheer violence of Earth's ecosystem, made it the most hostile environment ever catalogued in 500 years of galactic exploration. The Galactic Classification Council debated for 3 full years before settling on a Class 9 rating, the highest they had ever assigned. A number meant to warn every spacefaring civilization, do not approach, do not land, do not provoke the creatures that evolved here. And when humanity received that rating, we asked who lowballed it. Welcome to Monster HFY, and today's story is called The Warning. If you've never seen a story that made an entire galaxy regret a decision, strap in, because this one does not let up. Hit that like button right now and subscribe, because by the time this story is done, you're going to want more. Drop a comment and tell me, what rating would you give Earth? Now, let's go back to the moment the galaxy made the last mistake it would ever make freely. The year is 2387. Humanity has been a member of the Galactic Accord for 41 years. We came in quiet. We learned the rules. We traded, we negotiated, we built relationships across 60 star systems. And then the Vorathi Dominion decided that quiet meant weak. They were wrong. Senior Intelligence Officer James Harker was sitting in a briefing room on the UES Resolute when the transmission came in. It was short, it was clear, and it changed everything. The Vorathi had taken 3 human colony worlds, not attacked, not blockaded, taken 1.4 million people, gone from the census. Reclassified as Vorathi labor assets under some ancient territorial claim that had never been recognized by anyone except the Vorathi themselves. Harker read the message twice. Then he set it down on the table, looked at the fleet admiral across from him, and said 7 words that would later be carved into the memorial wall at New Geneva. Tell me we already have a plan. They did, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. James Harker was not the kind of man who raised his voice. At 44, he had the calm of someone who had lived through enough chaos to understand that panic was just wasted energy. He was lean, a little gray at the temples, with brown eyes that cataloged everything in a room before he said a single word. He'd spent 12 years as a field intelligence analyst, 4 more as a senior strategist, and the last 2 embedded with the UES Resolute as the fleet's lead intelligence officer. He was not a soldier in the traditional sense. He did not carry a rifle into battle. What he carried was worse, complete situational awareness, and the patience to use it at exactly the right moment. The briefing room on the Resolute was small and cold. Admiral Patricia Hayes sat at the head of the table with the kind of stillness that told Harker she had already done her grieving and moved into the part where she got things done. Around them, 7 other officers waited. The Vorathi filed the claim through the Accord Secretariat at 300 this morning, Harker said, pulling up the galactic map. 3 systems lit up in red, Kepler's Reach, the Barnard's Landing colony cluster, and the newly settled world of New Carthage. They're citing the Accord's pre-settlement doctrine, which grants prior territorial access to any species that documented the system before human arrival. We documented those systems, said Commander Rick Ellis from the far end of the table. We did, 2 of them anyway. New Carthage is a gray area. Harker highlighted the 3rd planet. But here's the thing, the Vorathi didn't file this claim because they think they can win it legally. They filed it because the Accord Secretariat moves at the speed of bureaucracy. And they've already moved 1,200 military assets into position around all 3 systems while the paperwork gets processed. The room went quiet. They're using the legal system as a clock, Hayes said. Yes, ma'am, every day the Accord deliberates, they consolidate. Our people on those worlds aren't being physically harmed yet, but they're being held. No outgoing communication, restricted movement. The Vorathi are calling it a security measure during territorial verification. Officially, it isn't an invasion. Officially, Ellis repeated, right. Which is why we need to be careful. Harker pulled up a second display. If we respond with force before the Accord issues a ruling, we're the aggressors. The Vorathi know that. They've structured this entire move to put us in an impossible position. Act too early, and we lose political standing. Act too late, and our people are absorbed into their labor system permanently. Hayes looked at him steadily. What do you recommend? Harker took a breath. We issue one warning, formal, specific, broadcast across every Accord frequency so every species in the galaxy hears it. We give them 72 hours to begin withdrawal. We detail exactly what happens if they don't, and we mean every single word of it. And if they ignore it, Harker's expression didn't change. Then we make sure the galaxy understands that we meant every single word of it. There was a pause. Admiral Hayes nodded slowly. Draft the warning, Mr. Harker. He was already writing it. The message went out 6 hours later. It was 11 sentences long. It named the 3 systems. It named the legal violations. It specified the withdrawal timeline. It described, with careful precision, the consequences of noncompliance. It was signed by the United Earth Command, transmitted in 17 galactic standard languages, and logged with the Accord Secretariat as an official diplomatic record. The Vorathi High Council received it 40 minutes later. And then, before the ink was even dry on the transmission logs, Ambassador Veth Carroll of the Vorathi Dominion stood before the full Galactic Accord Assembly and called it, publicly. On record, the desperate posturing of a species that does not understand its own place in the order of things. The chamber laughed. Somewhere on the Resolute, James Harker heard the recording of that laughter and felt something quiet and cold settle in his chest. He checked the countdown on his display. 71 hours, 44 minutes. The Accord Assembly Hall on Vethara Station was one of the largest structures humanity had ever entered. A curved amphitheater carved from asteroid-grade mineral that shifted color with ambient light, seating 400 delegates from 63 species. When James Harker walked into it as part of Earth's diplomatic contingent, he was aware of exactly how many eyes were on him. Some species had 4. Some had none, navigating by sonar. Some watched through bioluminescent patches along their skin that functioned as secondary visual organs. All of them were watching. Earth's formal representative was Ambassador David Cole, tall, composed, 58 years old, the kind of man who made silence feel like a complete sentence. Harker was there in an advisory capacity, seated one row back, close enough to pass notes, far enough to stay invisible. The Vorathi delegation sat across the chamber. Their lead diplomat, Veth Carroll, was a creature of considerable physical presence. 7 feet of pale armored plating, 4 upper limbs. A voice that resonated in frequencies that made human teeth vibrate slightly. He had the body language of someone who had never once considered losing. The Council has reviewed Earth's communication, said the Accord moderator, a Sehari small and gray-furred. With the weary patience of someone who had mediated 1,000 arguments between species, who all thought they were the reasonable ones. The floor recognizes Ambassador Cole. Cole stood. He did not smile. Thank you, moderator. Earth's position is simple. The Vorathi Dominion has placed 1.4 million human civilians under military restriction without legal basis. Our warning was filed, logged, and transmitted with full transparency. We are now 48 hours into the 72-hour window. We are asking the Council to demand Vorathi withdrawal before that window closes. Veth Carroll rose before Cole had even finished. The ambassador speaks of legal basis, while ignoring 600 years of Vorathi territorial documentation. We have survey records. Survey records, Cole said quietly, are not sovereignty. That landed. A ripple moved through the chamber, not quite approval, but attention. Veth Carroll's plating shifted, the equivalent of a dismissive shrug. Earth's warning is noted and categorized appropriately. As a threat from a species that has been spacefaring for less than half a century, the Dominion does not renegotiate under the pressure of inexperienced frustration. Cole sat down. He leaned toward Harker without turning his head. They're not moving, he murmured. I know, Harker said. The Accord won't rule in time. I know, 47 hours. I know, Ambassador. Harker kept his eyes on Veth Carroll. Let them laugh. Every word they say in here is being recorded, every vote. Every abstention. The galaxy is watching, and right now they think this is political theater. He paused. They need to keep thinking that for exactly 47 more hours. Cole glanced at him sidelong. What happens in 47 hours, Mr. Harker? Harker almost smiled. The warning expires. What the Accord delegates did not know, what the Vorathi did not know, was that in the 26 hours since the warning had been transmitted, 3 human fleet groups had quietly repositioned. Not in Vorathi space, not anywhere that would trigger a legal flag. They moved into uninhabited transit zones, the galactic equivalent of standing in a hallway rather than walking through a door. Perfectly legal, completely standard, nothing to file a complaint about. Commander Ellis had overseen the logistics personally, and it had been a masterpiece of careful, boring legal movement. 47 warships, 12 support vessels, 4 rapid deployment carriers loaded with ground forces that had trained specifically for forced entry civilian rescue. And nobody had noticed because nobody thought to look. The galaxy had rated humanity a Class 9 death world, and then spent 40 years assuming that the danger rating applied to the planet, not the people. That was the mistake. On the second day of the assembly session, a new figure entered the diplomatic observation gallery, a non-voting attendee, which was how she'd gotten a pass without much scrutiny. Her name, rendered in human transliteration, was Sina Vorith, a tactical analyst from the Yethric Collective, a small neutral species with no stake in the dispute. She was roughly human height, but moved with a fluid, forward-leaning posture. And her eyes were compound, 12 lenses arranged in a wide arc that let her see in almost every direction at once without turning her head. She'd been sent to observe, to write an assessment of humanity's diplomatic strategy and report back to the Collective's Council, who were deciding whether to bother maintaining their trade relationship with Earth, given the apparent shift in galactic power toward Vorathi influence. She sat 3 rows above Harker in the gallery. She watched him for most of the morning session and came to a conclusion. This man was not reacting to anything happening in the room. He was watching for something else entirely. During the recess, she made the professional mistake of approaching him. "You are the intelligence officer," she said. Not a question. Harker looked up. He took in the compound eyes, the posture, the Yethric insignia on her collar. "James Harker, you're from the Collective?" Sina Vorith. "I am assessing the situation for my government." She tilted her head, which among Yethric indicated direct inquiry. "You do not seem concerned." "I'm very concerned," he said. "I'm just not showing it here because showing it here would cost us something." She considered that. "The Vorathi believe you are bluffing. Most people do the first time. Is there a second time?" Harker looked at her for a moment, really looked. The way he looked at information, he was deciding whether to trust. Then he said, "Stick around, Ms. Vorith. You'll have a much better report for your council if you see this through to the end." She did not know why she found that credible, but she stayed. The morning session resumed. The votes were counted. The Accord, as predicted, declined to issue an emergency ruling, citing insufficient review time for a territorial claim of this complexity. It would be referred to a special committee. The special committee would meet in 30 days. In 30 days, 1.4 million humans would be fully integrated into the Vorathi Labor Registry. Ambassador Cole thanked the moderator, gathered his materials, and walked out of the chamber with the calm of a man who had just heard exactly what he expected to hear. 22 hours left on the clock. Harker followed him out. In the corridor, Cole turned to him with an expression that, for the first time, showed something underneath the diplomacy. "Tell me it's ready," Cole said quietly. "It's ready," Harker confirmed. Cole nodded. He straightened his jacket. Then God help them. But back in the observation gallery, Sina Vorith had done something interesting. She had pulled up the full text of Earth's warning on her data tablet and read it, actually read it, all 11 sentences, for the first time. Most of the delegates hadn't bothered. It had been treated as political performance, not operational document. She read the last line 3 times. "Non-compliance will result in the full application of United Earth Command's authorized response protocols, the scope of which has been communicated to the Accord Secretariat under seal, and will be released upon activation." Under seal, she looked up from her tablet. Her 12 lenses swept the empty gallery. Whatever was in that sealed document, humanity had filed it before the warning was even sent. They hadn't been bluffing, they had been loading. The 72-hour window closed at 600 station time on a Tuesday. James Harker was not in the assembly hall when it happened. He was in a secure communication suite 3 levels below, headset on, watching 5 simultaneous feed windows while sipping coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Admiral Hayes's voice came through the primary channel, steady, professional, the voice of someone who had already made peace with what came next. Fleet Group 1 is in position at Kepler's Reach, she said. Group 2 is holding at Barnard's. Group 3 has the New Carthage approach locked. Any Vorathi movement? Harker asked. Minimal repositioning. They're not scrambling. They don't think we're coming. Good, keep it that way for another 6 minutes. He watched the timer. 5:59, 5:58. At 600 exactly, a second transmission went out from the Resolute. This one not to the Vorathi, but to the Accord Secretariat. It was a 2-sentence message. Earth's 72-hour warning has expired without compliance. The sealed response protocols are now active. 14 seconds later, the sealed document was released to every Accord member simultaneously. Every delegate, every government, every species that had sat in that chamber and watched the Vorathi laugh, they all received it at the same moment. It was not a list of demands. It was an operational order, already signed, already in motion. In the Accord Secretariat's main hall, the moderator read the first paragraph and stopped. Read it again. Then quietly asked the room to be cleared so the council could convene an emergency session. In the Vorathi High Command's war room, Veth Carroll received the document and for the first time in the entire crisis went silent. His plating, the same plating that had shrugged dismissively 2 days ago, went rigid. Because the document detailed with precise and clinical language exactly what 47 human warships were going to do in the next 4 hours. The routes, the timing, the coordination. The legal framework that made every single action compliant with Accord military engagement law. It named the Vorathi commanders at each system. It listed the civilian evacuation corridors that would be opened and held open regardless of resistance. It included the surrender terms, generous, specific, and already signed by Earth's unified command. It had all been written before the warning was sent. Humanity had not been posturing. Humanity had given the Vorathi 72 hours to avoid a plan that was already complete. On Vethara Station, in the observation gallery she had never left, Sina Vorith read the released document on her tablet. Her 12 lenses tracked each line with the focused stillness of a creature processing something it had not predicted. She had written 3 drafts of her report in the last 2 days. The first said humanity was likely to back down. The second said the situation was uncertain. She had deleted both. Now she started a 4th draft. The opening line read, "We have been significantly miscalibrating the human variable." The first engagement happened at Kepler's Reach. Fleet Group 1 came in not from the direction the Vorathi defensive array was oriented toward. They came in from the system's asteroid belt, using the mass shadow of a dense debris field to degrade Vorathi sensor return. It was not a new tactic in galactic warfare. It was, however, one that required an extraordinary degree of navigational precision to execute safely at combat speed through unpredictable rock. The Vorathi commander at Kepler's Reach, a veteran of 4 border campaigns, later told the Accord Tribunal that he had assumed the humans would not attempt the debris field approach because no rational fleet would accept those collision probabilities. The UES Resolute and her escort group came through the debris field without a single hull breach. What they had accepted was not recklessness. It was months of simulated approach runs, pattern-analyzed debris tracking, and navigation algorithms that had been specifically built for exactly this system. The Vorathi had 11 warships at Kepler's Reach. By the time they realized the debris field approach was real and not a sensor ghost, 5 of those ships were already cut off from their formation. At Barnard's Landing, Fleet Group 2 didn't fight at all. They broadcast the surrender terms in Vorathi in the regional dialect in audio and text, on a repeating loop as they entered the system. Every 30 seconds, a human voice laid out the terms. Full withdrawal, no casualties required, formal cessation recorded and guaranteed. The Vorathi garrison commander listened to it loop 4 times before he made a decision that would later be cited as the only piece of genuine wisdom in this entire war. He withdrew. His ships pulled back to the system edge and held their weapons cold. He transmitted one word in response, acknowledged. New Carthage was different. The Vorathi force there was larger, a full battle group, not a garrison. And their commander, Field Admiral Reth Vassal, had received the sealed document, assessed the situation, and concluded that if the humans could be stalled at New Carthage long enough, political pressure through the Accord might force a ceasefire before Kepler's reach fell. It was a reasonable calculation. It was also the last reasonable calculation he made, because he based it on the assumption that the human fleet's primary goal was territorial. It wasn't. The primary goal was the civilians. New Carthage had a population of 412,000 humans, settled across 3 cities, and a chain of agricultural stations that followed the planet's temperate equatorial band. The Vorathi had concentrated them in the 2 largest urban centers after the occupation, easier to monitor, they'd said. Easier to protect, they'd claimed in their official communications. The ground teams from the UES Steadfast hit the atmospheric entry window at New Carthage 40 minutes after the orbital engagement began. The engagement itself was not going badly. Fleet Group 3 had made contact with Reth Vassal's battle group in the outer system, and the fighting was real, more intense than Kepler's reach, with actual weapons discharge and hull damage on both sides. 3 human ships took hits. 1, the destroyer Canute, lost propulsion and had to be pulled back by a support vessel. The crew survived, but the orbital battle was designed to be a distraction, while Reth Vassal committed his full attention to the fleet engagement. 12 atmospheric insertion craft carrying 900 ground personnel dropped through the clouds on the night side of New Carthage, the side facing away from the orbital battle. The side with no Vorathi air defense assets, because nobody had thought to put them there. The lead craft in the insertion was designated Actual One. Aboard it, Captain Scott Mercer, 3rd Special Operations Group, was reading a laminated card for the 14th time in 2 hours. The card had 3 things on it. The first was the population density map of Novo Lisboa, New Carthage's largest city. The second was the location of the 12 Vorathi command nodes that controlled civilian movement restrictions. The third was a single sentence at the bottom in bold print: rescue first. Engagement second, no exceptions. Mercer was 37, blonde, built like someone who had never once worried about fitting through a standard door, and currently wearing powered armor that made him look considerably larger. He had been in 3 prior operations on 2 different planets. He had never once disobeyed a mission card. 2 minutes to ground, the pilot said. Mercer looked at his team, 23 people in identical armor, checking equipment with the particular efficiency of people who had done this enough times that nervousness had been replaced by process. He did not give a speech. He pointed at the door. "Remember the card," he said. They hit the ground in a park at 3:40 local time, dark, cold. The city was under a curfew that the Vorathi had imposed on the first day. No outdoor movement between 2,000 and 600. Which meant the streets were empty, which meant the team moved without encountering civilians. The first command node was 4 blocks away. It took 11 minutes to reach it, 9 seconds to disable it, and 0 shots fired. The second node was in a building that had Vorathi security personnel inside. Mercer's team went in through the basement, secured the first floor, and moved the 3 Vorathi security officers into a side room before any of them could transmit a signal. The Vorathi officers were physically unharmed. They were also completely stunned, not by the capture, but by the fact that the humans had come up through the basement in total silence. By the time Reth Vassal's ground command realized the command nodes were going dark, 7 of the 12 had already been disabled. At Node 9, something changed. The team entered the building and found it occupied not by Vorathi security forces, but by 217 human civilians, families mostly, who had been relocated here from the outer agricultural stations. They were sitting in a converted warehouse space with inadequate heating, rationed water, and the particular exhausted stillness of people who had spent 2 weeks not knowing what was happening to them. When the door opened and Scott Mercer walked in powered armor, American flag patch on the shoulder, face visible through a raised visor, the silence lasted about 4 seconds. Then a child in the back of the room said, "Mom, that's a soldier," and the room stopped being silent. Mercer got on his radio. Actual 1 to Fleet, we have 217 civilians at Node 9. Sending coordinates, request priority extraction window. Copy Actual 1, extraction window in 40 minutes. 40 minutes, the orbital battle was still ongoing. The remaining command nodes were not yet down, and 217 people were looking at Mercer like he was the first solid thing they had seen in weeks. He took off his helmet. "My name is Captain Scott Mercer," he said loud and clear. "You're safe. We're going to get you out. I need everyone calm and ready to move when I give the word. Do you understand?" Nods, tears. Someone near the front started applauding, and Mercer had to resist every instinct to tell them there was no time for that, because there genuinely wasn't. But he also understood what those 200 people needed to see in that moment. He let it go for 5 seconds, then he raised a hand. "Okay," he said, "here's what we're going to do." Meanwhile, in orbit, Admiral Hayes received a transmission from Reth Vassal. It was not a surrender, it was a threat. He had 2 things she didn't know about. A planet-based weapons platform on New Carthage's southern continent, offline during the initial occupation because it hadn't been deemed necessary, and a second fleet group in FTL transit. 20 minutes out. If Hayes didn't pull back, he was going to bring the platform online and use it against the extraction craft. Hayes listened to the transmission with Harker beside her, patched in from Vethara Station. "He's stalling," Harker said immediately. "The second fleet group is probably real, but the platform, he wouldn't threaten it if he'd already decided to use it. He's trying to buy time." "Agreed," Hayes said. "How much time does Mercer need?" 34 minutes, Hayes keyed the Vorathi channel. Her response to Reth Vassal was 8 words, "We will be gone before you decide." She closed the channel and looked at her crew. "All ships maintain formation. Do not fire unless fired upon." "We're on a clock. Let's move." 34 minutes. Somewhere on New Carthage, Scott Mercer was moving 217 people through a dark city toward an extraction zone. And the entire galaxy was watching a real-time feed from the Resolute sensor array, because Harker had made sure every active Accord delegate had access to it. And in the observation gallery on Vethara Station, Sina Vorath was watching the feed with 12 unblinking lenses, and for the first time in her professional career, she had stopped writing notes. Then the Southern Weapons platform on New Carthage came online. Harker saw it on the sensor feed before Hayes did, the power signature bloom on the planet's southern continent, the targeting sweep beginning to arc toward the northern extraction zone. His throat went tight for 1 second. "1, Admiral, platform is active." Hayes was already moving. "All ships intercept vector on the platform signature non-destructive options first." "I want that thing blinded, not destroyed. We don't know if there are people near it." There were. The Vorathi had placed a processing facility adjacent to the platform, one that contained human agricultural workers from the outer stations. It was either a coincidence or a deliberate shield. Harker suspected the latter. "He put people next to it," Harker said. "He wants us to either let him fire or give him a war crime story." Hayes looked at the feed for exactly 3 seconds. "Options 1. Harker pulled up a file he had flagged 48 hours ago, when the operations team had been modeling worst-case scenarios at New Carthage. The platform uses a distributed targeting array, 7 individual nodes across a 12-kilometer radius. If you knock out 4 of the 7, the main array can't achieve firing solution. The nodes are in the open, no civilians near them. You modeled this already. I model everything, Hayes almost smiled. Which ships? The Amarillo and the Decatur. They're already in the geometry. 20 seconds later, 4 precision strikes hit 4 targeting nodes on New Carthage's southern continent. No explosions, no fires, focused electromagnetic pulses that turned the nodes into expensive paperweights. The platform's targeting array swept uselessly twice more and then went dark. On the ground, Scott Mercer heard the distant concussions and checked his display. Platform offline. He exhaled once, then kept walking. The extraction zone was a large, flat park at the northern edge of Novo Lisboa. By the time Mercer's team arrived with their group, 2 other ground teams had already delivered civilians from the other city centers, 600 people total. Sitting in the dark park under the stars of a planet that had never been theirs to keep. The first extraction craft dropped through the clouds 11 minutes ahead of schedule. The evacuation took 22 minutes. Everyone boarded. The ground teams went last, Mercer stepping onto the final craft as it lifted and watching the city of Novo Lisboa shrink below him through the open loading ramp. He had never been to New Carthage before this mission. He suspected he would think about that park for the rest of his life. The second Vorathi fleet group arrived 14 minutes later to find New Carthage's orbit completely cleared of human ships, and the ground forces already aboard and jumping to safety. Reth Vassal's combined force was now in a system where no human civilian remained to be used as leverage. He had nothing left to threaten with. At Kepler's reach, the 5 isolated Vorathi ships surrendered in sequence over the following 2 hours. Their crews were treated according to Accord prisoner protocols, documented, processed, not harmed. The human colony population of Kepler's reach was already being escorted back to their homes by the time the last Vorathi commander signed the cessation form. At Barnard's Landing, the Vorathi garrison that had withdrawn peacefully was given a formal letter of acknowledgement from Admiral Hayes. In it, she noted the garrison commander's decision and described it as an act of professional judgment that had prevented unnecessary harm on both sides. It was signed and filed with the Accord. The letter would be read aloud at the tribunal 4 months later. In the war room of the Vorathi High Command, Veth Carroll received 3 things in rapid succession: the loss report from New Carthage, the cessation confirmation from Kepler's reach, and a private message from the Accord moderator informing him that the sealed document humanity had filed was now the subject of an emergency review by all 63 member species, and that the Council's failure to act on the warning was being formally examined. He had not slept in 31 hours. He looked at the tactical display showing 3 systems where his forces were either surrendered, withdrawn, or outmaneuvered, and he understood, fully, for the first time, what had just happened. Humanity had not started this fight. They had finished it, and they had done it while every Accord delegate watched the rescue feeds in real time. While every species saw humans moving civilians out of a hostile-held city in the dark, on foot, without firing a single shot in anger until a weapons platform forced their hand. While the whole galaxy watched the Amarillo, and the Decatur take out 4 targeting nodes with surgical precision rather than level a continent. The Class 9 Death World had sent its people out into the galaxy, and those people had brought every single one of their own home. Veth Carroll transmitted the cessation order to all remaining Vorathi forces in all 3 systems. It was not a glorious moment. It was not a tactical retreat with dignity intact. It was a complete and acknowledged withdrawal from a position that had been rendered untenable by a species that had planned for every contingency, while the Vorathi had spent their energy laughing. The last message he sent that day was to the Accord Secretariat, formally withdrawing the territorial claim. On Vethara Station, in the observation gallery, Xenovorith watched the cessation announcement come through on the public feed and sat in silence for a long moment. Around her, other observers from neutral species were talking in low, rapid tones, the kind of conversations that happen when assumptions get rearranged. She didn't join them. She opened her data tablet and finished her report. The last paragraph read, "The Vorathi calculated that human restraint was a sign of limited capability. The opposite was true. Restraint was the strategy. The warning was not a bluff or a diplomatic formality. It was a courtesy extended to a civilization that did not recognize it as such. The Yethric Collective is advised to reconsider all prior assessments of human military and strategic capacity. We have been, in all probability, the beneficiaries of the same courtesy without knowing it." She saved the document. Then she got up and went to find James Harker. The Accord Tribunal convened 61 days after the cessation. It sat for 3 weeks. Every action taken by United Earth Command was reviewed against Accord military law. The debris field approach at Kepler's reach. The precision strikes on the targeting nodes. The civilian evacuation operation. Every decision logged, every order examined. At the end of 3 weeks, the tribunal issued its ruling. United Earth Command had operated within the bounds of Accord law at every stage. The Vorathi territorial claim was found to be without valid legal basis. Reth Vassal was censured for the weapons platform activation. Veth Carroll was removed from his diplomatic post. 3 senior Vorathi Council members faced formal sanctions for the decision to proceed with the occupation despite receiving Earth's warning. The Accord Secretariat also issued an internal review of its own conduct, specifically the decision not to act on the warning in time. The review was uncomfortable reading. It resulted in a procedural reform that reduced the emergency response window for occupied civilian situations from 30 days to 72 hours, the same window humanity had given the Vorathi. Ambassador Cole stood before the full Accord Assembly on the final day of the tribunal and delivered Earth's formal statement. It was shorter than most had expected. He thanked the tribunal. He acknowledged the Accord's procedural reforms. He expressed Earth's continued commitment to the Accord and its principles. And then at the end, he said, "We issued one warning, we meant it. We hope the record is now clear on that point, so that the next time, if there is a next time, the warning will be sufficient." He sat down. The chamber was quiet for a moment in a way that felt different from before. James Harker watched from the gallery and thought about the 11 sentences he had helped write, the specific, careful, legally filed warning that the galaxy had dismissed as posturing. He thought about New Carthage, and a park in the dark, and a child saying, "Mom, that's a soldier." He thought about the Canute losing propulsion in an outer system and the crew that had made it back. He thought about the Barnard's Landing garrison commander who had made a different choice than his counterparts and received a signed letter about it. He thought the galaxy had learned something real. He thought he hoped it stuck. Outside the chamber, Sina Vorith found him in the corridor as she had found him once before. She looked different now. Her compound lenses had a different angle of focus. The posture shifted slightly forward, the body language of a creature that had moved from assessment to understanding. "Your report is finished," he asked. "It was finished before the tribunal," she said. "I've sent 3 follow-up addenda since then." A pause, the Yethric version of a wry expression. "My council found the original report difficult to accept. The follow-ups were also difficult. I believe the 3rd one was described as alarming." "What did the 3rd one say?" She looked at him steadily with 12 lenses. "That the most dangerous thing about your species is not your weapons or your tactics or your ships. It is that you give fair warning and then do exactly what you said you would do. Every time. Without exception." Another pause. "Most civilizations bluff. The galaxy has been operating on that assumption for 600 years. You do not bluff." Harker considered that. "No," he said. "We don't." She tilted her head, the direct inquiry position. "Does that ever bother you, the weight of always meaning it?" He was quiet for a moment, long enough that it became an answer in itself. "Every day," he said. "That's why we only issue one warning." She nodded, slowly, the Yethric gesture of genuine understanding. They stood in the corridor outside the Accord chamber, where the galaxy was rewriting its assumptions about a Class 9 death world and the people it produced. The sounds of 63 species delegates filing out filled the space around them. And somewhere on the UES Resolute, Admiral Hayes was reading the tribunal ruling with a cup of coffee that she had actually remembered to drink while it was hot. And on New Carthage, 1.4 million people were home. The galaxy had called Earth the most dangerous place in the known universe. They just hadn't understood yet that the most dangerous thing Earth ever made wasn't a storm, or a predator, or a pathogen. It was a patient person who had already planned for the part where you didn't listen. Hey, if this story hit different for you, drop a comment below and tell me which moment got you. Was it the debris field, the park in the dark, that final line? I read every single one. And if you want more stories where the galaxy learns the hard way what humanity is actually made of, subscribe to Monster HFY and share this video with someone who needs to see it. The next story is already loaded. You're not going to want to miss it.